This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation. We're almost halfway there. Welcome to our continuing special series brought to you by PlaceToBeNation.com and Place to Be Nation's main event, as main event counts down its 100 greatest WWE superstars of all time. I am Scott Criscuolo from the Place to Be podcast and Place to Be Nation's main event. With me, my co-host on Place to Be Nation's main event and the Kings of Sport and various other outstanding programming, the Godfather, Nate Milton. Trying to be very subdued as clear to the top, trying to build the suspense, Brother Nate.
Yeah, I like the vibe. I mean, it's good to be back, Scotty. To quote a wise man, it's been a long time. We shouldn't have left you without a list to step to. I hope everybody enjoyed Mania season, but we're back, Scotty. We're in the home stretch. We are getting ready to cross that threshold. We're 10 away from the top 50 WWE stars of all time, in our opinion. So this should be fun.
It should be fun. This is part 5. If you've been listening, you're listening to all of them. So in this episode, we will count down numbers 60 to 51. So at the end of this episode, the end of this part, we will be halfway done, and I think this top 10, we will, we'll see. We'll still have some kind of weird names, but as we get closer, I have a feeling we get towards the end of the episode, 53, 52, then we'll start. And then with our next episode, next part 6, then we'll really start getting into like the standard guys, the guys that probably everybody has, that most people have in their top 50. Maybe different numbers, but the top 50. And the guys who were, as I said way back in our first part, Nate, once you get above 40, now you're talking about guys, and maybe gals, who are great at everything. We've been saying, these first 40 that we've done, not almost all of them are great at a couple of things. Maybe not great at some, but maybe they're really, really good at one thing and other things. But once we get like above 40, then we'll start talking about guys that are great at everything. So...
Yep, and to kind of give a quick refresher to the listeners out there, if this is your first time checking out our series, A, thank you, and B, press pause and go back and listen to the first 4 episodes.
Yes, we're not rereading the first 40 guys.
No.
Yeah.
But the criteria that we've been using and everybody at Place to Be Nation used is the NJPW system. Which stands for nuance, jump up factor, promo skills, and work rate. And I think the interesting thing to me, Scotty, is I was kind of looking at our list and the nation's list, is everybody used the same criteria, but the weight that was put on each of those 4 things differs from person to person. And I think that's why we've gotten some really interesting choices so far.
I agree. A lot of people have weighed promos. And yes, if you're listening to this episode, then you obviously listened to part 4, and I went into an extensive debate because it has happened over the past several weeks in some of the chats that I'm in about my omission of AJ Styles. Yet
wait a minute, you didn't have AJ Styles on your list, Scotty?
I didn't I tell you that? Yeah. I know. Yet I had Asuka and Charlotte, and I'm sure I'm going to get, but whatever. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun debating. And for those that don't know, of course, just to look ahead, Our next top 100 greatest WWE dash of all time is going to be tag teams. And that'll be very interesting, Brother Nate. We won't delve into that now, obviously, but criteria, the NJPW, probably a little different. You'd have to probably wrap your head around it a little differently, right, than you would around like individual superstars. You know? Yeah,
because when you talk about tag teams, there's that not only will you have guys that may be great at one thing, but within the team, you might have somebody who's a really great talker and a terrible worker, and then the other guy's the workhorse. So it'll be interesting to see how these things kind of shuffle out once we get to that.
Exactly. So, and of course, follow along with us here, because not only will Nate and I be giving our individual guys on this list, but we will also be giving what the PlaceToBeNation.com list was, which was, just to recap again, because this I want to repeat every time, just so everybody's clear. The Place to Be Nation top 100 list that you see on the website was a compilation of your ballots. This is not the staff. I mean, some staff members put ballots together as fans, but we didn't do like a staff list. This is all 118 ballots, including Nate's and mine, that went into this, and we want to thank our guy Stephen Graham, my PIC, a few others, put together, some type of, Stephen Hawking-esque compilation of equations, God rest his soul, to together the top 100. So the top 100 on the website, on PlaceToBeNation.com, is your list. All you 116 out there, and then myself and Brother Nate. That's our list. It is not a staff, arbitrary list. It was put together just like yours was put together. So I want to preface that at the beginning of every part, just so everybody's aware. Now, again, this is episode 5. This is part 5 of our 10-part series. So tonight, Brother Nate and I will be counting down numbers 60 to 51. So when we're done with this episode, we will be halfway through. So I believe you batted lead off last episode, so I'll bat lead off this time.
All right.
All right, my number 60, and I mentioned this guy, Brother Nate, on our last part, on part 4, because he was kind of in a different place if we were doing an all-time list, and I obviously counted his daughter on my list. So why don't I just dive right in? My number 60, woo! He'd be my number 1 of all time. Of course, I'm talking about the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Now, again, like we said, Nate, self-explanatory. If this was, now I don't know where you would have him, and I'm sure a lot of people would have him, considerably higher. If this was like when PWO did their what they do, like 8 million of all time, or whatever the hell they did. I think they ranked every wrestler that ever walked in a ring ever. I think Dirty Don Montoya was ranked or something. I don't know. But if we were doing that, if we were doing top 100 ever of all time and everything, he'd be my number 1. Period. He is the great. If I died tomorrow, I could say he is the greatest wrestler I've ever seen in my life. But since we are only talking about one promotion, we're only talking about active. We're only talking about 5, 6, or 7 years, and he of course had 2 runs. He had, or I shouldn't say 6 or 7 years, almost 12 years, I guess. 1991 to 1993, and then 2001 till 2008. And obviously his 91 to 93 run was fantastic. He was the sole survivor at the Survivor Series, won the Royal Rumble in Albany, and then, of course, wrestled a 5-star match with Randy Savage at WrestleMania 8, where he did lose the WWF title. Had a weird storyline with Perfect and Savage and Ultimate Warrior throughout the summer. Ended up winning the title back in September, only to lose it 6 weeks later in what would be the first of, 5 World Wrestling Federation title reigns for Bret the Hitman Hart. Left, went back to WCW, got beat up by the NWO like 8 zillion times, became commissioner, became president, had a nurse, him and Piper went on some weird power trip, yada, yada, yada. Came back in 2001, the night after the invasion ended, and then spent the next 7 years before officially retiring from the WWF ring at WrestleMania 24 when he lost to Shawn Michaels. Now, did he have great matches in that stretch? Absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously, the match at WrestleMania 8 with Savage, the Rumble itself, the match he had, the Loser Leave Town match, or Loser Leave Raw match he had on Raw in 93 with Perfect was tremendous. Matches he had when he came back. Ones that stand out for me, his match with Vince at the 2002 Royal Rumble, one of my personal favorites. Love that match. His match with Taker at WrestleMania 18 was fantastic. His 2 matches with Triple H at Taboo Tuesday and Survivor Series 2005. And obviously his match with Shawn at... So he had some great matches, but obviously most of the second half, 01 to 08, he was a figurehead. He was part of Evolution. Yeah. So he really didn't put on the kinds of matches he put on in, 85, 86, duh. So obviously we can't put him on that list of being number one. No, absolutely not. But he definitely belongs here. I was thinking about putting him in my top half, Brother Nate, maybe like 49 or 48, but I just couldn't. Not enough, particularly in the second half. Yep. I mentioned the few matches I liked, but a lot of stuff was good, but not outstanding. But for me, he's got to be on the list, and I think 60 for me is a good slot for him.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Obviously, I had him a little bit lower, but we both had father and daughter on the list, and I think both positions are earned. And I think when you talk about Ric Flair, it is kind of a tale of 2 runs, and then that first run to me was greater, but it was shorter. And then the second run was longer. It didn't have as many peaks as that first run did. So, yeah, I think he definitely deserves a spot on the top 100, but I don't think he's done enough with the WWE to be in that upper echelon.
Right. Okay, so there we go. You obviously already had him on your list. So, Brother Nate, you're number 60.
My number 60. If you could say Ric Flair, and this is going to be a stretch. I'm going to go a long way for this segue. If you could say Ric Flair had a major name, then this guy could be considered one of the co-stars of Major Pain. Of course, I'm talking about the man from Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Aha!
One of the best big men to ever do it. They invented a WrestleMania with Lawrence Taylor in one of the best celebrity matches ever.
Maybe.
We could make that argument.
Sure, absolutely.
Bam Bam Bigelow.
Bam Bam Bigelow. That's right. Scotty B. I'll hold off my comments. Please, floor is yours.
Yeah, like to me, I think the negatives against Bam Bam would be that, he didn't have the lengthiest term in the WWE. I think he had 2 runs, and neither one was particularly long. But when you talk about characters that stand out and leave an indelible mark, I think the combination of the way he looked with the tattoos and his ring gear, plus the fact that he was one of the first big guys I can remember that moved that way. Now it's kind of commonplace to see big guys that can move, whether you're talking about guys in the WWE or guys on the independent scene like a Keith Lee. But Bam Bam to me was one of the first heavyweight dudes I saw that could do a moonsault, that did cartwheels in the ring, that looked like a real athlete, and not to throw shade on a previous selection that I had on an early show, but he was Calhoun.
No, he wasn't. No, absolutely not.
And he almost always got a good reaction. Yeah, I love the stuff with him and Luna Vachon. I thought that had more legs than they gave it. He was always a really solid mid-card heel. Again, going back to that match with LT, that match was better than it had any right to be. And as much as people give credit to Lawrence Taylor, and yes, he should be commended, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Bam Bam for that.
I do. Bam Bam. I believe we'll discuss Bam Bam. I will discuss Bam Bam maybe in a couple episodes. Bigelow is a guy, and Bigelow can be also in a dubious fun fact here, Brother Nate. He is probably the only guy in the history of the business to get screwed by both Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels. Usually it's one or the other.
Yes.
But he got boned by Hogan in 88 because he was getting too many pops. And he was boned by Shawn in like 95 because he wasn't in the clique. So, but yet his time in the WWF should not be discounted. Even early on, I mean, we're watching JR and I, of course, doing our Vintage Vault refreshes, and we're talking about Bigelow in mid to late 1987, and he was killer, man. Great. Yeah. He had a couple good matches on Saturday Night's Main Event. He was over with the crowd. I mean, he was crazy. He had Sir Ali as his manager, the Hump. No, he most definitely belongs on the list, and I might be overgrading him when we get to him later on, but that's fine. Obviously, I've made up my own rules for my list, so and that's fine because I can. There's no doubt I have no issues with Bigelow whatsoever. That's a great pick, Brother Nate. We'll more about Bigelow down the line. All right, who was on the Place to Be Nation? I'm going to call it the fan composite list. That's what I'm going to call it now because I have, as you've noticed, Brother Nate, I've struggled with these in the first four parts to try and come up with a name for the list without making it sound staffish. The PlaceToBeNation.com fan composite list. Here's their number 60. He was on 98 ballots. Remember, 118 total. 98 ballots. He was as low as 100 and as high as 16. Big Daddy Cool. Diesel / Kevin Nash.
Okay.
Let's put it this way. We'll be discussing Kevin Nash later on in this episode.
Ooh, spoiler.
So... Maybe not, but maybe. So there was PlaceToBeNation.com's fan composite number 60. All right, Brother Nate, your number 59.
All right. This is a guy who is a WWE Hall of Famer. This is a guy who had a big part. He was a big component of the rock and wrestling era. And he was involved in the very first WrestleMania. So, I know some people would say that he was good. Some people might even say he's excellent, Scotty. But to me, he's always going to be simply wonderful. And that is Paul Orndorff.
I thought you were going to say SD Jones. And then you'd be my favorite host I'd ever have.
Hey, just wait till we get to the top 20.
Great pick. Great pick. I'll have some Bigelow. Well, that too. But I'll have some Pretty Paul comments down the line. But good pick. Good brother.
Yeah, to me, again, I think as with Bigelow, if you want to make a case against Paul Orndorff, it would be longevity. Mm-hmm. But with what he did in such a short time, you talk about that feud with Hogan in '86 or the match with Piper against Hogan and Mr. T at WrestleMania. Like, Orndorff was such a key part. Like, again, he's kind of like Bob Orton plus. We talked about Cowboy Bob Orton on the last episode where he wasn't the headliner, but you couldn't do the rock and wrestling deal without him. Mm-hmm. And I think Paul Orndorff fits in that category. I think, he was somebody that when you talk about his mic work, like, he wasn't Ric Flair, The Rock, or Stone Cold, but I thought he cut good promos. Mm-hmm. Looked like $1 million in the ring. And for his size, I thought he was actually a pretty smooth worker. So I think for those early days of kind of the Hulkamania rock and wrestling era, mm-hmm. and what he meant to that, because your heroes are going to be as good as your villain, I think Paul Orndorff deserves a spot on the list.
You're not going to get zero argument out of me for two reasons. Number one, And Nate, I could say this to you because you'll laugh at it. The hilarious, well, first of all, the great TNT skits where he would make fun of all the fat people at the gym. That was friggin' awesome. And then the intentionally unintentional racist overtones he had at the end of '85 when he compared Tony Atlas to Willie B at the Atlanta Zoo. I don't think he meant to, but or when he called Mr. T greasy. I don't know if he totally meant. I don't know if he knew where that was going, but
it's like my like one of my favorite Ric Flair promos ever. It's like I don't know if Rick was intentionally being racist or if it just kind of came off that way. Is the one where he's like, Dale Murphy, he's a real big deal around here in Atlanta, and of course you got to Walker for all the black folks out here. Like, okay, I don't know if he's just giving us representation or bringing either way, it's a good promo.
Like us white guys can't like Herschel.
Yes, and like black people can't like Dale
Murphy. I know. But oh my God, he was. I mean, I don't want Mr. T touching me. He's black and greasy. What?
Yeah, I think it played better in 85, 86.
I know. But
I don't think they can get away with a promo like that today.
No, absolutely not. But and obviously, if you go back to the archives on PlaceBeNation.com, Jason Greenhouse and I did an exceptional nomination pod blast about Paul Orndorff. So you're not going to get an argument out of me. Pretty Paul definitely belongs there. Great look, great physique, great promos. But I'll talk more about him when I get to him on the list, a little bit higher up. All right, my number 59 is a tremendous worker for a guy his size. We're going to talk about a guy similar to Bigelow. Had similar tats. I think he was a great heel at a time when the roster in WWE was going through somewhat of a transition. And ended up becoming actually one of the better big workers of the mid-2000s. In fact, Nate, I know you were jealous of his hairstyle. His manager called him the Samoan Bulldozer. My number 59, God rest his soul, is Umaga. Or
yes,
as your boy William Regal used to call him, Umanga. This was a guy, and I was crestfallen when he passed away. Here was a guy who came in as a gimmick, kind of a dopey one maybe at the beginning because these kind of gimmicks don't fly anymore. But he came in 2006, and again, remember the big rumor at the time was, I don't know if this was completely substantial. I got to look this up, but there was a strong rumor that Samoa Joe was going to be Umaga if he came to WWE in 2006. Yep. I don't know if that's total. I don't want to. I heard it a lot, but I won't say if it's true or not. So obviously they got which one was he? He was Jamal, right? Yeah, he was Jamal in 3-Minute Warning, and he got a little smaller.
Yeah, because Rosie ended up being the superhero in training.
Yes, he became the that. And he immediately got on my radar as a fantastic heel. And here's a guy who was really smooth in the ring for a guy his size. Could handle any kind of worker. Flair put him over. In fact, I argued it on one of our one of our vintage vaults. I think it was Backlash 06. I got pissed off that that Flair jobbed to Umaga, but that wasn't Umaga's fault. I just thought that was dumb booking, but that's just me. But Umaga ended up becoming an integral part of that roster for those couple of years. 2006 to mid to late 2008. I think he wrestled into 2009. Obviously, he had 2 stellar matches with John Cena, and his match, that last man standing match at the Royal Rumble in 2007, probably one of Cena's 5 best matches. And the guy just knew how to be a good worker in the ring. He utilized his size. I think he got a little weird, kind of trying to balance that weight, which led to him taking all the weight pills, which ultimately led to his death, which is really sad. But I think he stands out for me at a time when the roster needed some really good heels because you had such a strong babyface champion in Cena who was not losing, apparently. The only reason he dropped the title in October was because he popped his pec muscle. So you needed really good... And it sucks because then he ended up having that feud, that post-Mania feud with Khali, which was... But... I think Umaga came at a time when Cena really needed a... Because remember, he went through the whole thing with Angle, and he was getting booed, and then in the matches with... And then he had a pretty good feud with Edge. It was great for Cena to find a new type of opponent, and Umaga was the perfect guy for him, in my opinion. And he stands out to me as a guy, another glue guy, on the heel side of the roster during a time in 06, 07, 08 was the roster was a little bit in flux, had some holes in it, and I think he filled those holes nicely. So he's my number 59. and very proud of it.
That's a good pick. That's a strong pick. Umaga is somebody who I think kind of gets lost in the shuffle, especially because of the way that his life ended too soon. But, yeah, he was definitely one of those heels on the rise in a time where monster heels were in short supply.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, and particularly, again, at a time in the mid-2000s where the roster had a shitload of holes in it, he filled one of those holes admirably. So Umaga is my number 59. All right, PlaceToBeNation.com's fan composite list on the site, they're number 59. I've already talked about him. He's already been on my list. He was on 99 ballots. He was and this is actually pretty impressive. He was as low as only 53, and he was as high as 19. I'm sorry, 93. I read that wrong. I'm sorry. He was, because I was saying I didn't rank this guy that high. He was as low as 93, as high as 19. JBL. Speaking of great mid-2000 heels. So the Place to Be Nation composite list had him at number 59. I know I had him a little while back, so there you go. There's your number 59 on the list. All right. My number 58.
Yes.
My number 58, current guy, been with the company now, it's coming up on almost a decade now. He has had some low moments, he's had some high moments, but you could call him a glue guy. I made a very public prediction on this guy in 2011, and your boy was wrong. I'm going to steal PC because he loves sticking it at you when he's right. Your boy here got it right when this guy won the Royal Rumble, and now he is one half of probably one of the 2 or 3 best tag teams in all of professional wrestling. And let's just say, Brother Nate, you wouldn't be confused with him if you were standing right next to him. My number 58, one half of the Bar, and that is Sheamus. Sheamus is another one of those glue guys. Good worker in the ring. Former champion. Pulled off one of the biggest upsets ever at the... was it... I'm trying to think. Was it TLC 2010? No. TLC 2009. Yeah, TLC 2009. That he upset John Cena and won the WWE title. And then... in
the tables match.
In the tables match. Then he lost it in the chamber, and then he won it back, I think, at Fatal 4-Way. Former World Heavyweight Champion, IC Champion, I think he's been, US Champion. He's been all over. He's good tag partners. He was part of one of the most unpopular moments in history when, it depends on your point of view, I guess, when he cashed in his Money in the Bank on Roman Reigns. And now kind of fell into a pretty damn good tag team. And he's a good worker, good power moves, very unique look. Can't complain about that. Can't dispute the very unique look he's always had with his hair. And now, of course, he's got the giant mohawk. I was not a fan of him as a face. I like him more as a heel, but I like him in this role now. And he's whatever you want him to be. I guess they're heels, but I mean, you could argue either way what he is. But he's, again, a glue guy who's been one of the most reliable in the company. I think he's only had like one major injury. And he's there when you need him. And your boy here, Brother Nate, back in like August of 2011, or maybe even July of 2011, said this guy's going to win the Royal Rumble. And sure enough, he won the 2012 Royal Rumble. And then, of course, beat Daniel Bryan in 30 seconds at WrestleMania 28, which indirectly led to Daniel Bryan being what he is now. Of course, everybody shit on it then because everybody does. But and then Sheamus had a good feud with Big Show, and he's had other good feuds. Again, I think I like him a little more as a heel than as a babyface, but right now he's a kind of whatever you want him to be, and I think he's good at that. So my number 58 is Sheamus because he's another one of these solid current roster glue guys that is neat. That is important cog. I think it will be remembered down the line after he retires as a guy who was reliable and gave you what you needed from him. And right now, what he is one half of one of the 2 best tag teams in the company right now.
Okay. Not mad at that. You had him a little bit higher than I did, but yeah, I think Sheamus has earned a spot amongst the roll call of the greats that we've got going on here.
Yes. All right. So you're 58, sir.
This might be my most controversial pick this week because this is somebody that I really liked that I think a lot of people dislike. This is a guy that had tons of potential. And maybe only a quarter of that or a third of that, maybe at most, was realized. He's somebody who was highly entertaining to me, but he was often injury prone. And, he's a former U.S. champ and a former Mr. Money in the Bank, Scotty. I'm going to show some love to Ken Kennedy.
Wow. Okay. That is very controversial.
Kennedy.
That's I'm okay. I'm game.
Like this is the one that I know. Like there's some people listening, Scotty. They might be like, Kennedy. How does he? This is a little high for Kennedy. And yeah, I might be ranking Kennedy a little bit high, but this was somebody I really enjoyed around this time period because he was somebody that jumped off the screen when he came out. You know, that entrance was so different, and the in-ring style where he was kind of this hybrid, like he was a smash mouth dude, but he wasn't this big overpowering guy either.
Right.
He went up to the top rope and had the Kenton bomb. He was a jack of all trades, master of none, because I think he cut a good promo. I think he was decent in ring, not great, but not terrible by any stretch. His biggest problem, I think, was number one, he probably rubbed some people the wrong way backstage. And number two, he was injury prone. And it seemed whenever he started to get steam, he would get hurt and be out for a while. And when he came back, he'd have to start over he'd have to start all over again. But I thought Kennedy was somebody that I enjoyed. And there was a time where SmackDown was kind of this weird show that felt like an SmackDown's often felt like an afterthought to Raw, but particularly, in this era where Kennedy was there, it felt like SmackDown was kind of its own pocket universe within the WWE, and he was a character that I really enjoyed. I really thought had a ton of potential. He never seemed to phone things in, but he also, again, like I said, felt like he left some potential on the table, but I enjoyed him. So for my personal list, I got to give Kennedy some props.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point of these lists, and I'm actually glad, Nate, that you put a guy like I don't have him on my list, but I like Kennedy. I don't have him on my list, but I'm happy you did that because again, I think people seem predetermined to have to put guys that everybody else has on, or ignore other guys that maybe I understand the whole NJPW. And I understand that, you're a fan, but sometimes you got to put a little of both in there, and I think a lot of people did. Obviously, the most controversial in terms of that decision is a guy that's obviously on my list much higher up in terms of whether he belongs on here or not, and he does. Where he belongs doesn't matter. He belongs on the list. You know who I'm talking about. A lot of people like to ignore him or forget he doesn't exist. But
James Ellsworth, I know.
Yeah, exactly, because he's got two hands. And sometimes you just got to put, I just liked him.
Yeah.
Or like him if it's a current guy. I want him on the list. Good. Good for you. Sometimes just personal preference and fandom needs to be in. It's called intangibles. All right, no one should have to feel guilty about that. And I'm that's a good. I'm proud of that pick, Nate. Again, I don't have him on my list, and I don't hate Kennedy whatsoever. I like this TNA stuff. Obviously, that's not what we're discussing tonight, but I think that's a good pick for my example of, hey, yeah, we're using the NJPW system, but you know what? There might be a guy I want to put on here just because I want to.
Yeah, maybe this. I think it also because this is kind of around when the wrestlers started taking advantage of social media, and I think one of my favorite moments from around that time was, remember after he got released, everybody was saying he was hurt or whatever. And I think he went on YouTube and just basically, like everybody was saying, his wrist or his arm was hurt. And he just went on and didn't say anything and like flexed his arm and rotating his wrist and just kind of shrugged his shoulders. And I was like, you know what? I like this guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like he's probably an a-hole behind the scenes, but in terms of this character that he portrays on my wrestling television, I like him.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Sadly, though, I think the injuries derail him from being on my list anyway, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. All right. The PlaceToBeNation.com fan composite list, number 58. Actually, pretty serendipitous here for me, Brother Nate. He was on 95 ballots. He was as low as 99, as high as 14. The other member of the bar, Cesaro.
Nice.
So, I will have Cesaro a little bit later on. Maybe not in this episode, but later on. All right. Brother Nate, you're 57. Let's keep the line moving, brother.
Yes, Scotty. You know, we talk a lot on these podcasts about glue guys, and a lot of times we're talking about guys from the Attitude Era or guys from the Hulkamania era. But I got a modern-day glue guy here at my next choice. This is somebody who was a 4-time Intercontinental champ, 3-time U.S. champ, and a 7-time tag team champ. And in my opinion, he is the People's Royal Rumble champion. He's never won a Rumble, but he always has the moment you talk about after the Rumble, and that is Kofi Kingston.
Ah, okay. Good pick.
Kofi's got the longevity. You know, he's going on, 11 years? Or actually, I think he might be going on 12 years at this point now.
Well, I'm thinking...
Came in 07.
Yeah. When did he lose? When did he beat? It was 08 that he beat Jericho for his first IC belt, right? What was it, Night of Champions, I think? Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah, he's the guy who, to me, is the consummate tag team wrestlers in the company, whether you're talking about his team with the New Day, his team with Evan Bourne, his team with R-Truth, and the team with CM Punk, which I thought was a great combination that didn't get a whole lot of traction.
I agree.
And that might be the theme of Kofi's career until he get a New Day. He had some great moments, but never seemed to get any traction because I thought that they missed a great opportunity with this character when they didn't really commit to him during that Randy Orton back in the day.
Mm-hmm. I agree, too.
Like, I thought you had the chance to make a new babyface that was kid-friendly. He was good in the ring. He was solid on the mic once he dropped the Jamaican accent.
Yeah, I know, right? Yep, I agree with that.
And that might be one of my favorite Triple H moments, too, by the way. Like, aren't you supposed to be Jamaican? But yeah, Kofi to me is a guy that, like, I kind of went back and forth with the New Day as I was putting together my list. And obviously, Big E made it. Xavier, sadly, did not make the cut for me. But I thought out of any of them, Kofi certainly had the best resume, not only for his longevity, but because he's performed at a reasonably high level since he's been in the company. You know, he might be the main event guy that people think of, but like you said, Scotty, the company needs glue guys, and I think Kofi's a modern day glue guy.
I don't think there's any doubt. No doubt he's a glue guy. No doubt he's a glue guy. Good pick. I like that. We'll see if he's on my list. But yeah, I think he's the most talented of the 3 New Day guys. And I think you're right in ranking him higher than Big E, only because I think Big E's time had to be... Big E's big moment is the next one. You know how that term is. Whereas I think Kofi, I don't want to say he's maxed out, but he's a glue guy who may not ever up moment, but is a guy that you can always rely on to be. And I'm curious to see what will happen come the next year if they do break the New Day up. Not break them up like somebody has to. I just certainly hope that doesn't happen, that whole cliche where how you break a group up. Well, one of them has to turn heel. No, they don't. They just start wrestling solo.
And I know some people listening might think it's a bit of a waste, but I would love for Kofi to win one of these big battle royals, maybe even the damn Royal Rumble, just to give him one last, like, he doesn't even have to win the title,
right?
But give Kofi kind of that golden or you know that going away present, because the dude's earned it.
Maybe he'll win that battle royal in Saudi Arabia or whatever that's coming up at the end of the month.
That'd be great. Yeah, the greatest battle royal. Let Kofi do like 2 or 3 crazy spots and have him have at least one battle royal under his belt.
Have him jump on the king's throne. But no, I like that pick, Nate. I like that pick a lot. My number 57. We're going now from new school to very old school, and this is a guy that's already in the website on the site's composite list. The fans have already picked this one. He's the first guy to ever win the three-peat. Former world champion, intercontinental champion, and tag team champion. Came back as a, I guess, I don't want to say enhancement, but he was one of those veterans that kind of, glued the house show circuit back in the day. And he was to the Puerto Rican contingent what Bruno was to the Italian contingent. My 57, former world champion from Culebra, Puerto Rico, Pedro Morales.
Yes.
Now, I have to preface this by saying JR and I have been doing our the new vintage, our Vintage Vault series through the 80s, and we've watched a lot of Pedro on the 80s house shows, and he didn't job nearly as much as he should have, clean, and some of the matches were a little shaky, but, he was in his probably late 40s, early 50s by then. But you cannot argue the historical and cultural impact as much as anything else that Pedro has done for this company. He was the third ever world champion. He was just as big, again, while Bruno took care of the Italians in the tri-state area, he obviously took care of the large Puerto Rican contingent in the tri-state area back in the 70s. And, he had an accent, so his promos were probably not the greatest. But after listening to Antonina Rocca do fucking on these All-Stars, anybody sounds clean. And he's just a guy he's a legend. He's a legitimate legend. Again, we kind of, JR and I kind of pick on him and Kelly on the show because some of the house show matches he has in 86, 87 are not great. But I always argued he never should have come back in that role in the first place. Like, I feel like that sullied him. He should have been treated like a Bruno. He should have been treated like a not really superstar Billy Graham, but he should have been treated like a guy who's royalty, who should never have had to come back and do jobs in the mid-80s. You know what I'm saying? That always bugged me a little bit, and maybe that's why it was so frustrating to watch him have some pretty bad matches at the tail end of his career. But it is not hard to argue that in the 70s, he was one of the icons of the business and one of the early pioneers of the early WWF in the late 60s into 70, 71, 72 when he won the world title from Ivan Koloff and had a solid couple of years. And he definitely belongs on this list for his cultural impact on the business and in WWE. It legitimately upset me, and I think I said it on a couple of our vaults that I was kind of bummed seeing him in the mid '80s having to do jobs on superstars and fucking house shows. It frustrated me because he shouldn't have been treated that way. But maybe he thought he could keep wrestling. Maybe he needed the money. I don't know. He deserves to have, and he's not Bruno. In terms of like the hierarchy of the business, he's definitely not Bruno. But I do think that he does deserve to have a sliver of royalty like the other champions of the 70s did. I think he's no different than Backlund or any of those guys in the 70s that, sans Bruno, of course, that was a huge impact in the business in WWE at that time.
Yeah, I've obviously had no problem with that pick. I was always a fan of Pedro, and I'm just kind of a fan of Vince Sr.'s kind of mindset, which is the more I go back and look at it, and the more I kind of Vince Jr.'s arc as the guy running the show. Mm-hmm. His daddy was fairly progressive, and it might be the argument that we had on Main Event a few weeks ago, Scotty, where it's not about black or white or brown, it's about green. But I just like the idea that back then, you could have Bruno as this Italian superhero for the Italian kids out there, and you could have Pedro for the Hispanic kids out there, and it was like it didn't seem weird or out of place.
No, absolutely not. And Nate, check out the episode we did. I think it was episode 96 quite a few weeks ago. We had a great discussion. We were kind of talking about Moolah and that whole controversy. We kind of led ourselves into the cultural impact on the territories and that kind of thing. It's a great discussion. Check it out. But yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I almost called you Pedro. Hey, Pedro. And I think the same holds true for guys like Junkyard Dog. We talked about that. We won't get into that whole discussion now, but similar kind of thing with him. But I think Bruno did so much and just is that legendary guy. But I still do believe that Pedro deserves a sliver of credit as well culturally for what he did in the 70s. So that's why he's on my list. Right. Let's see. You did your 50. Did you do your 57? You did, correct?
Yeah, that was Kofi.
Oh, it was Kofi. That's right. Okay. All right. So Place to Be Nation. Oh, this is a guy you like. Guy I like too. The Place to Be Nation composite list number 57. A guy we both like. Done 92 ballots, which is kind of a shame. I wish he was on a few more. He was as low as 100. He was as high as 13. And the picture we have on the website is great. In his awesome salmon suit, taking his retirement before inducting John Cena into the Hall of Pain. Your number 57 on the PlaceToBeNation.com list is Hall of Famer to be Mark Henry.
Oh, actually, he's a newly minted Hall of Famer, Scotty.
Oh, that's right. Yes, newly minted Hall of Famer. Correct. You are correct, sir. Yes.
I know it's been a long week.
I know it has. Yeah, this is like our 87th. This is like our 87th show in the last 4 weeks. But newly minted Hall of Famer. Correct. I keep reminding myself since we had that 9-hour WrestleMania preview that I said that like 1,000 times. But yes, Hall of Famer Mark Henry, number 57. All right. Brother Nate. My turn, I believe. All right. Number 56. Well, number 56, I don't say this is a controversial one because this guy was a hot button for a lot of reasons. He has already been mentioned this evening on this episode, and he's not far off from where the Place to Be Nation fan composite list had him. My number 56, former Triple Crown champion, Tag Team champion, Intercontinental champion, and World Wrestling Federation champion, Big Daddy Cool himself. Diesel / Kevin Nash. I know we bashed the crap out of him for, having crap matches in 95 and everything. But I got to tell you, Nate, one of the many great advantages that I've had as a fan that JR and I are doing this tremendous refresh project where we're recapping all of the pay-per-views and everything, and now we're doing all the Raws in the 90s. And I watched every single Raw. From 1995. And I got to be honest with you. Maybe if you watch the paper, and I did it first, if you watch the pay-per-views in a bubble, then Kevin Nash's matches are unwatchable dreck, most of them. Matches with Sid are horrendous. The match he had at In Your House 4 with Bulldog is horrendous, which led to a Vince McMahon tirade, which ultimately led to Diesel losing the title to Bret Hart at the 95 Survivor Series. But on TV, he was still over. He was still Big Daddy Cool. Unfortunately, he had to wrestle Mabel. But to Kevin Nash's credit, when he had a guy in front of him, look, let's be honest, and this is something that I thought about as I was watching these Raws. If you're going to have Diesel versus Mabel as the main event of your SummerSlam, what the hell do you expect? Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We can't all be that dumb, and I'm including myself. You know what I'm saying? So, if you're going to get, and obviously his best opponents were arguably two of the greatest guys of all time, Bret and Shawn. He didn't have a bad match with either of those guys. But one match that has stuck out to me, and I got to give JR credit because he's kind of gotten me to love this match more and more I watch it. I don't know the last time you watched it, Brother Nate, but I implore our listeners here, if you haven't watched him against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 12 in a while, watch it. It's not as bad as looking at it on paper would make you think it was, if I said that right. It was a good match. It was a very good match. And Taker needed it. I kind of think Diesel needed it too, or Kevin needed it too. But here's a guy who cut great promos. He had a good look. And when he needed to, he put on a great match. He was, and again, I'm kind of, look, I'm redeeming myself or kind of changing my tune here because I used to trash him to no end. But he also was handed a bunch of guys that you really couldn't do anything with. Sid, if Diesel wrestled Sid, I think you would get a hell of a better match than you did the two matches he wrestled in '95, and that's because they tried to make Sid a typical WWF, faction chicken shit heel, and that's just not Sid. We talked about Sid extensively on the last episode. So I put Kevin Nash on here because he was over with the fans. He was bridged a gap between the Federation era and the Attitude Era, I guess. And his leaving, he might be the first guy we'll talk about, Nate, who leaving the WWF actually led to them being great in a weird way, But I'm sure, a few people left him off their list, as I mentioned earlier, and that's fine, but not a guy that should be ignored as not only one of the 100 best of all time, but the most important in the era that he was there.
Yeah, definitely. Now, he wasn't the worker that Scott Hall was, at least not in front of the cameras. But,
yes.
There's a reason why he was a big star for both major companies. The guy had his matches weren't great, but by the standards of the time, he wasn't awful. There were some questionable choices that I think the company had in terms of opponents, and it's very reminiscent to the Undertaker's early run, where we'll just throw him in with big guy X, Y, or Z,
right,
and see what happens. And more often than not, it wasn't great. But I don't think you can put that all on Nash. So I think he deserves a spot for how important he was during that transitional phase. And when he came back, he had some entertaining moments. The NWO reboot wasn't great, but it wasn't because Nash wasn't being Nash.
Yeah, no, exactly. All right, brother Nate, you're 56. You're Lawrence Taylor. Right.
Let's go from one WWE superstar with an amazing head of hair to another WWE superstar with an amazing head of hair. That is the one and only 7-time WWE Women's Champion, Trish Stratus.
Okay. Wow, you had her pretty high.
Yeah.
She did have great hair.
I had Trish fairly high, and, when I was kind of ranking women, it's difficult because, obviously, by any metric, the women are better workers than the women of the early 2000s or the 90s or the 80s, but they're also given more opportunities to be great than those women were. And I think the reason I give Trish a lot of credit is because she was somebody who by all means and by all right not be good. She was just brought in there to be a pretty face and a great set of TNA. But she worked hard, and she became one of the more female superstars this company's ever seen, and influential. Like, if you ask any of those girls that came up from NXT or that are in NXT today, 9 times out of 10, one of the names on the list of people that inspired them is going to be Trish Stratus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think Trish is somebody who got to a point where I don't think she was ever great in the ring, but by the time she left, she was very good. And I think even more than her in-ring work, her character work was excellent, especially when she was a heel. Like, I remember the stuff with Jericho and Christian worked out really well. I enjoyed when she had the broken nose gimmick, and the moment on that match on Raw where Trish pulls off the Stacey Augman Plastic Man mask,
yes,
and reveals that she didn't need the mask at all. is just a wonderful moment of heel work by Trish. And, she was a good babyface, but I thought she was a great heel. And, probably one of the most important women for the company. Like, I think if this were, we talked about that, the whole Moolah Battle Royal debacle. I think if they had done that in 2025 instead of 2018, you could make a good argument that it ain't the Trish Stratus Battle Royal, because I think she was that important to that next generation of female competitors.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I had her considerably lower than you, but I did have her on my list. And the one thing, and I said it before, I always respected Trish for being for pretty much learning from nothing and becoming a pretty solid worker.
She
for those
was
stretches.
terrible.
She was awful. She was absolutely awful. And look what she turned into in such a short period of time. So I have no qualms with that. Great.
Like, she could have easily just been Stacey Carter if she had been lazy.
Yep. Or Kat.
And she was much more.
I said Kat. Or Terry. Marlena. Something like that. Yeah. All right. PlaceMeNation.com's fan composite list at number 56. A guy I'm sure we both have later on down the line. He was on 90 ballots. I can't believe 20 did not put him on their list. This is crazy. He was as low as 98, but he was as high as 9. So there's a wide swath. But I'm pretty sure we both have him. And that is Mr. Rick Martel. So he is PlaceMeNation.com's fan composite list number 56. I have him higher, so I'll talk about Ricky Martel, as they say UA, on a future episode. So, okay, you are up, Brother Nate, with your number 55.
Yes, and this is a gentleman who I am happy to say the book is not closed on his WWE tenure. And I know some of the listeners might think I have this guy a little bit low, but it's not because I didn't respect the guy and appreciate his work. It's just I think he was a late bloomer in terms of really kind of cracking that glass ceiling in the WWE system, and that is one Daniel Bryan.
Wow. 55.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've got, and there's reasons for that. I got reasons.
This is great. Now I really, everyone's going to totally forget that I didn't have AJ on at all. This is awesome.
So being a good tag team partner.
Thank you, brother.
and see, the reason I've got Bryan low is because he's great in the ring. He became really great on the mic. He had a connection with the audience. 3-time WWE champ. He was a world champ, an IC champ, US champ, tag champ. But it all seemed to happen within the span of 1 or 2 years for him.
Right.
And he was in the company for 5 years.
Right.
As an active competitor. And so there was a lot of time where I thought he was just kind of toiling and they were wasting Daniel Bryan's opportunity. And it wasn't until that match with Sheamus at WrestleMania that you said earlier that the audience really started to get behind Daniel Bryan. And it's funny because I remember that Mania clearly because I went to watch it with a buddy. We were having some drinks at a bar that was showing WrestleMania. And I got there, maybe about 15 minutes late. I was fashionably late. And we're watching the matches. The night goes on, and, we get to, hour number 2. We get to hour number 3. And then I'm like, hey, isn't Daniel Bryan supposed to have that match with Sheamus tonight? And he's like, oh, they already had it. I'm like, they already had it? I'm like, oh, that must have been the 15 minutes when I was late. And he's like, no, that was the 30 seconds when you were.
Yep.
That was the 30 seconds when you were late because the match was so short. And I was like, okay. And I think that was the moment that Daniel Bryan, as we know him, was born. And so that's the only reason I'm really kind of docking him, is that I love the stuff with him and the Wyatts. I loved, I went to a house show in Hampton when they were doing that whole Daniel Bryan as a member of the Wyatt family. And even in the jumpsuit, he was still one of the most over people on the show. Of course, we had that great WrestleMania moment where he beat your boy.
Yes.
And became, that to me is still one of the greatest WrestleMania moments. and we know how much this company loves WrestleMania moments.
I do not disagree.
One of the greatest WrestleMania moments of the past 15 years.
I agree. Do not disagree.
And so, yeah, like, honestly, if Daniel Bryan had started the way I think he should have and was appreciated by the company the way I think he should have, he's easily top 30, top 25 maybe even for me. But because it took him a while to get going and for them to see where he had, I had to dock him a little bit. So but the good thing, though, Scotty, like I said, is he's back, and who knows? We might have, 2 or 3 more years of great Daniel Bryan dream matches ahead of us. So I'm hoping the next time around we do something like this, I get to put him higher.
Yeah, and I think, and your thinking on Daniel Bryan's the same as my thinking as an AJ. If we ever do this list again in 5 years, he goes at the same pace, he'll be in probably my top 10 because the body of work just gets bigger. Yeah. I will hold off my Daniel Bryan because I have him higher, but I'd like to think that this renaissance, and we're not, and it will continue. It was at WrestleMania, and it'll continue. And we'll see what happens because he's got a great roster of guys he can work with. Yep. So I like that pick. I like that. Well, obviously, I love that pick. I have him higher, but I love that pick. All right, my number 55, brother. I would have commented on a while ago when you had him, but I wanted to wait. I actually have this guy higher than you. Number 55, the pretty boy of the New Day, Mr. Kofi Kingston. I had him at 55. I love Kofi. Creative worker, a lot of variety. A lost opportunity in that feud with Orton.
Yep.
I think that's pretty obvious. It's a bummer, to see what would have happened had he gotten that push and maybe would have been a world champion. But he's multi-time tag team champion, former U.S. champion, former Intercontinental champion. He's got a resume, and he's one of the best pure workers in the last 10 years in this company. And a glue guy. Like I said, got to have those guys. 60% of a roster is glue guys. Can't not have them. So he's definitely one that will always be remembered as just a tremendous worker. Good, pretty. Like I said, good with the kids. Great baby face. Always, nice bright tights. Creative ways to not get eliminated in the Rumble. They're running out of them though. Maybe he needs to be put on a crane or something. And maybe that's the next one. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep that gimmick going and if they run out of things. But so anyway, I don't want to. You had a job with Kofi, so I don't want to go too crazy. But definitely a guy that deserves both a slot on our list. So
yeah, to me again, just kind of reiterating both of our thoughts on Kofi. I think he's a guy that, man, it's great that he has the longevity, but he got into the company too early. Because he was in the era where smaller guys still weren't really getting their due.
Right.
And maybe if he comes into the company in 2010 or 2011, we see a different path for Kofi.
Yeah, maybe. No, I agree with that. Coming in at a different time might have helped him, but
yeah, to me, I think he could have been, and you talk about his connection with the kids. He could have been like a Black Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, that's not a bad comparison. Sure.
I think he's a better promo than Ray. There's no slight on Ray, but I think Kofi's a better talker than Ray.
He is. I agree with that. Yep, I agree with that. So, yep. So he and you had him at what? 57.
Yep,
57. I have him 55. Speaking of serendipity, brother Nate, the PlaceToBeNation.com fan composite list. Their number 55 or number 55. He was on 92 ballots. He was as low as 89, so he's the first guy I think we've had that whose lowest slot was not in the 90s. Yeah. As low as 89, as high as 17. And you and I had him at the same place. Mr. Monday Night himself, Rob Van Dam.
Wow.
So, 55 for RVD.
I'm surprised somebody had him as high as 17, but I'm actually kind of happy.
I know. It is kind of cool. Makes me feel a little bit better. So there we go. So there's RVD. All right. Brother Nate, you are up with your 54.
All right. I know I'm gonna
Or is it my turn? Am I up at 54? Now I'm confused. No, it's my turn, I think, right?
Yeah, because I went first with Daniel Bryan.
That's right. Damn it. That's why I have Nate on the show. Justin would have just let me fuck up, but nah. All right, my number 54. Arguably one of the greatest heels in the history of this company. And in the short time that he was on top, again, a guy that filled a hole when the roster was a little bit fractured, but did a hell of a job as arguably one of the best heel runs as a world champion in this company. My number 54, Yokozuna.
Wow.
No, I don't think Yoko's 2-year run, in our opinion, from when he debuted in late 92 until he lost the casket match to take Survivor Series 94, that 2-year run, arguably one of the best runs by a heel in the history of the company. He was a tremendous bad guy. And I thought a great world champion. Even though we got boned at WrestleMania, he found a way to recover from that and ended up becoming a champion later on, and then had a great run until he lost to Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10. But this was a guy who never had to speak, had his spokespeople. He had Fuji, he had Cornette, and that made him even more mysterious, more menacing. And I think the thing for me, that's why I put Yoko so high on this list without really being a promo cutter. I know that's part of the NJPW, because he didn't need to. Some guys don't have to. Brock Lesnar's going to be on a lot of guys' lists. Never talks. You know what I mean?
And some guys shouldn't talk.
No, absolutely. Some guys shouldn't talk. Ahmed Johnson should have had a manager.
Yeah.
And he was a great, he moved for a big man. I talked about this a couple episodes ago with Bundy, and it's the same. It was Bundy in the 80s was like Yoko in this 2-year stretch. And then by 95 though, he got really, really big, and then he really couldn't move at all. But from 92 to 94, and he was just one of the greatest champions as a heel, and was a great tag champion with Owen. It was pretty much the tail end of 95, and pretty much those first 5 months of 96 when he was really, really bad. But he spoke softly and carried a big stick. And I think that's why he deserves the respect he gets. So my number 54 is Yokozuna.
Okay, that's a good pick, man. I was always a fan of Yoko, and I think like having two managers made him all the much more mysterious, because he's got Fuji, but then he's got Cornette as like this American liaison.
Right.
I always loved that gimmick.
Yep. So and God rest your soul, Yoko, another one who just couldn't maintain the weight or balance the weight, and it's really sad what happened. Brother Nate, you're 54.
All right, here's another pick. I think that'll be the theme of my next few picks of a guy that people probably think I have too low. And the reason I have this guy low, Scotty, is not because I don't think the guy was good. You could make the argument again with Yokozuna that he had one of the greatest short heel champion runs in the company's history. But for whatever reason, he never quite connected with me. It's like that old Kings of Comedy, Cedric the Entertainer joke. Like Luther Vandross's curl was never quite right. Just right. And that's how I felt with this guy. It's very similar to how I feel about like crooner music, like Sinatra or Dean Martin, Harry Connick. Like I know technically they're good, but it's just not my cup of tea.
Right. Yep.
And that's how I feel about this dude who was a member back down 6. He is one of the most decorated champions in the company's history, and he's a Hall of Famer. And that is Edge.
Interesting. I like this pick. I have him considerably higher because I do connect with Edge. I love Edge. But please, I'm curious. This is actually one I've been looking forward to. Please, the floor is yours. I'm I'm fascinated by this because Edge is a guy for me. But go ahead.
And I know you can't take away his accomplishments. You can't take away the multiple championships. Like any title that was to be won, he pretty much won it. Mm-hmm. Whether you're talking about the World Championship, the WWE Championship, Continental, U.S. I think he's a 14-time tag champion, which is crazy.
Yeah.
King of the Ring, Money in the Bank, Royal Rumble. Like he's done it all. One of the best finishers. He hit one of the best spears in the WWE. But he never really connected to until after the Matt Hardy Lita thing. And I think I loved his pairing with Lita. And and maybe it's just I like Edge when he has a female to play off of, because I loved his stuff with Lita and I loved his stuff with Vicky Guerrero. Mm-hmm. But when he was just Edge, it didn't connect for me. I wasn't a fan of Rob Zombie, Never Gonna Stop, Hulk Hogan tag team partner Edge. He just felt a little too bland. But again, that heel persona that he developed when he became the Rated R superstar, he had some really good matches with Cena. That might be the biggest compliment for me. Is I think Edge was the opponent that brought the best out of John Cena and kind of helped him become Big Match Johnny.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I have him as high as I have him.
Edge really worked good as a force, and I know some people love him as a face. I never got into him as a face, but I do think he was one of the company's best heels.
He's a tremendous heel, one of the greatest of all time. That was a good evidence, Nate. I like that a lot. I love Edge. I'll talk about him, in the next few episodes. And I could see him not being relatable to some. And again, I'll get more into this because I talked a lot about this with Justin when we did our vintage vaults before we switched up and we were doing the modern day pay-per-views. Edge is a difficult guy to wrap your head around because you're not sure what kind of worker he is. And I think that is one thing that may hurt him with some people. But I'll get more into that when he comes up on my list, because he'll be coming up a little bit down the line. So, all right, my number 53 is a guy you already had. You already had this guy on your list. I don't think, not this episode, a couple episodes ago. Actually, it might have been last episode. Came out of nowhere and ended up becoming probably one of the best cruiserweights of the 90s. And he was a member of two of the greatest factions in the history of the business, the NWO and DX.
Yep. And
as you said, if I may, we must cue Uncle Cracker. Our number 53. My number 53 is the 1-2-3 kid himself, Sean Waltman / X-Pac / Lightning Kid / 6. Well, not 6 because we're not talking 6. I have a risk for him because I don't think he ever, even though he was, in Global, and I don't know if Vince ever meant to have him be anything when he arrived in the WWF in 1993. But I think he willed himself to somehow get a great slot, over the next decade with the company, both companies. And I'll include, even though we're talking WWE, I will include the time in WCW here because he grew his character when he was in 95. I think leaving was the best thing for him. And then when he came back in 98, had a great run with D'Lo Brown, had some great matches in general. By 01-02, he was slowly losing his luster, and then obviously he had a bunch of personal issues after that. But I don't think, like you said, Brother Nate, I don't think you can discount what he did for this business, particularly again at a time when there was Rock's transition in the business in general. Every faction needed like a little guy, and he was the good little guy. On top of the fact he was a great wrestler, and he's probably got one of the most memorable Raw matches of all time when he was in '94. So he deserves his due, regardless of whatever his off-field shenanigans were. He looks good now, and I think he intermittently helps down at the PC with his boy Hunter and the NXT gang. So he has definitely given back a little bit. And I think, will he go into the Hall of Fame? Probably. I mean, he's next to Hunter. And Hunter won't go in for a while. He's a guy left.
Yeah.
Sean's in, Scott's in, Kevin's in. He's not. And maybe he will eventually. I like to think he will. He deserves it. So.
And he's cool with the people making the decisions, so that always helps.
Well, duh. That's the best thing. That's the only thing, really. If Mantar was in the clique, he'd be in the Hall of Fame already. So you know what I'm saying? All right. All right, so there you go. So there was our number 53s. Or did you? Yes, you did your 53. Right? Your 53 was okay.
I had Edge.
Oh, did I do 50? Oh, you know what? 54 was. Oh, you know what? I didn't do the Place to Be Nation 54. I'll do it right now. The Place to Be Nation, we'll do 54 now. The Place to Be Nation composite number 54, I had him already. I don't think he's on your list. He was on 83 ballots, so not a lot, actually. But he was as low as 100, but he was as high as 7. World champion. Superstar Billy Graham. So, 35 people did not put him on their ballot. That doesn't surprise me. But somebody had him as high. Pretty impressive. So he was the PlaceToBeNation.com's fan composite lists number 54. Number 53 is a guy that I already had. We actually talked about him in this show, Brother Nate. He was on 96 ballots. He was as low as 94, as high as 15. And that is the other half of the bar, Sheamus. So there you go.
Okay.
All right, so. All right. Who is up? I am up. Mine 52. And this might go, Nate, under category.
No, I think it's my turn.
Oh, is it your turn?
Yeah, I actually have 3 left.
Oh, so you didn't do your 53. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
That's where we got. We took that left turn at Albuquerque.
We did, yeah. I think I brought some X-Pac's, medicine. Go ahead, Brother Nate. You're 53.
Uncle Crocker threw us off.
Uncle Crocker, yeah, I got everything I ever wanted, and I'm skipping my turn. All right, go ahead, Brother Nate. Number 53.
I think it kind of works, though, because this guy had maybe one of my favorite X-Pac matches.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he took a left turn somewhere.
Oh, he's taken plenty of left
turns.
turns.
Okay, there you
go. But he's somebody, if we were doing the tag team rankings right now, he'd certainly be in the top 5 for me.
Oh, okay.
But we're not, so he's not in the top 5 on this particular list.
Right.
He's a 2-time world champ, a 1-time WWE champ. He's won the IC title, the Hardcore title, the European title, multiple tag team titles, including the WWE's version of the WCW tag team title. He is the charismatic enigma, Jeff Hardy.
Oh, okay. Good pick.
Jeff Hardy, to me, is almost an inverse of Edge. So it's kind of fitting that I have them so close together on my list, because while I think if you look at them technically, Edge is a better talker by far. That might be the enigma part. Like, why is Jeff the charismatic enigma when he can't cut a damn promo? But people love him. And I think that's, like, I always connected with Jeff Hardy. And for me, this is a guy that was great as a tag team guy, but really shown when they would give him those opportunities to be on his own. Like, one of my favorite matches was a match on SmackDown Undertaker.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, I know the one you're talking about. Yep.
And at the end of the match, Taker shows Jeff Hardy respect for just taking this ass whooping and not giving up and going toe-to-toe with Taker. And I was like, yeah, I really like Jeff Hardy, and he's somebody who I liked in TNA. I even liked heel Jeff Hardy, which I know a lot of fans didn't like in TNA. But I think this is a guy that, were it not for his personal demons, which he still kind of battles those to this day. Were it not for that, this is somebody who could have, the sky would have been the limit, because people were into him. He was entertaining in the ring. He took risks. He had some of the most memorable moments in history when you talk about those TLC matches with the Dudleys and Edge and Christian. So yeah, I think, I've had a lot of people on my list from a lot of different places, some people from Asia or some people from North America or Mexico, but I had to carve out a play for the mayor of the Imagination, one, Jeffrey Nero Hardy.
And you've already now covered everybody on the compound, because I know you have Senor Benjamin in your top 10. So that's all. That's all we need to. That's all we need to deal with. And where do you have the Vanguard?
I mean, Vanguard 1 is at number 1.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. That's right. Because we're doing our final episode 10 through 1 on the Lake of Reincarnation. I'll have to reincarnate half this list. All right. And we gave you the 53. All right. Okay.
So now we've each got 2 left.
All right. So my turn. I will go. All right. My number 52. Now we'll get back in. All right. Yeah. Now we're back. Okay. My number 52 is a guy that probably a lot of people think I have low. He might, you could consider him Federation era royalty, but I was never a total fan of his in-ring work, but everything worked for me when it came to him. Awesome heel. Pretty good babyface, but a great heel. Even tried to help the company out when he came back in the 90s. Sadly, the things within his personal life kind of got in the way. But he was one of those guys that never needed to win a belt to be over, either as a heel or as a face. So my number 52 from Stone Mountain, Georgia, Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake, to me, should be in the Performance Center right now, teaching a class on how to be on how to cut a promo, and teach a class on psychology, because no one was better at it. And when you talk about cutting a great slick promo and really putting over what the promo's all about and what the match or the feud is all about at that time, watch his promo at WrestleMania 6 against Ted DiBiase. Wallowing in the muck of abs. Words that I had no fucking clue what they were when I was 16, 17 years old. And meanwhile, he totally mesmerized me. In the ring, he wasn't horrendous. He wasn't terrible. Was he, great? I think he was one of those guys that it depended on the opponent.
Yeah.
It was like,
But that damn DDT, that was over.
Yeah. Well, the DDT finishers ever.
Yes.
Sadly, it's now become a throwaway. Well, I would say a throwaway move. I mean, Orton's is like a setup, but
and nobody hit it like Jake.
I know. I mean, he snapped it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's one of the greatest finishers ever, and he's one of the greatest heels ever. So my number 2 is the Snake, Jake Roberts.
Yeah. That is a quality pick. I'm not going to go too much more into it because I've got Jake on my list a little bit higher. Okay. But yes, this is a guy who personal problems aside, is the time great heels in the company. And yeah, I wish we would have gotten that great triumphant Jake comeback, but to know that he's in a better place now, but in a better
place in his life. Eulogy. Yes.
Jake's in a better place now. Now he's DDTing people in heaven.
No. A lot of people think he should, but he's not.
Jake's in a better stage of life, and yeah, I think not only would he be somebody that would be valuable to the company in the performance to talk about psychology and cutting promos, but I think just in terms of talking to these young guys and girls about how not to succumb to life on the road.
Yep.
And to not, be dependent on substances to kind of medicate yourself. And I think Jake would be a valuable resource in a bunch of different ways for the company.
Yep. I agree with you 100%. And I thought he was going to get that in 96, and then he fell off the wagon, and that was that. It's very sad. All right, Place to Be Nation, the fan composite list, their number 52 is a guy that I've already talked about.
See, that's how we made the left turn at Albuquerque, because you keep skipping me, Scotty.
Yeah, I know. Oh, wait, you go again? Man!
Yeah, because you just did your 52.
Damn it.
And I didn't do my 52.
You can't pick Kofi again. No, I'm kidding. Not Farouk. No, I'm only kidding. Sorry, Brother Nate. You're number 52.
My 52, of course, is none other than, I was trying to think of somebody ridiculous.
AJ Styles. We all think he's ridiculous. No, I'm only kidding.
No, actually, though, I've got somebody that is going to put a lot of people in an uproar, because I'm sure this is a guy that a lot of the voters had in their top 25. I'm sure some probably even had him in their top 10.
Mm-hmm.
But this kind of continues a theme for me, Scotty, where now we're getting, we're parsing, and we're parsing the greatest of the greats.
Yep.
And we're looking at that in JPW. And I think a lot of folks place a high value on the W, which I do as well. But it's not the be-all and end-all for me.
Right.
Like, I think I'm big on the nuance category. I'm big on, having that connection with the audience. And this is a guy who, up until the last couple of years of his career, didn't really connect with me. And he's very much in that edge. And, I hope you and the listeners are sitting down, Scotty, because number 52 on my list, he didn't even crack my top 50, is the one and only CM Punk.
Okay. Okay. I should have skipped you.
I love how somebody just threw their laptop on the ground. Like, I'm tired of this shit. I can't take it anymore.
The AJ Styles thing just gets more and more buried. This is tremendous. I'm not skipping you anymore because you're just making life easy for me. Nah.
Especially when they hear my next pick. Like, they're going to be so mad.
Oh, my God.
But to me, this is very much similar to Edge for me. Like, Punk was always good. Like, I've enjoyed this dude from ROH to TNA. People forget he was in TNA. To his time in the WWE and that terrible ECW on Sci-Fi reboot. But as a character, he didn't connect me until he dropped the pipe bomb.
Yep.
Like, the Straight Edge Society stuff was cool, but it never grabbed me, Scott.
Yep. Okay.
But when he hit that pipe bomb, and I was there on that Raw in Hampton, where he came back and debuted the Cult of Personality theme for the first time.
Oh,
that to me, that guy's a star. The guy before that, he was cool. He was a great technical wrestler. He was somebody that could cut a hell of a promo, but he didn't grab me. He didn't snatch me by the collar and say, "You're going to pay attention to what I'm doing." Mm-hmm. But that guy that came out to Cult of Personality, that was a star. And I think Punk was in the company for a little over 7 years.
Yeah.
But I would say he was only at that megastar level for the last 2, maybe 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, again, it's kind of the Daniel Bryan / Edge reasoning, where these guys have had great careers, but the part of their career that grabbed me was not as long as some other guys that I'm going to have on this list. So Punk certainly deserved to be in anybody's top 100. I understand people that would have him in their top 25. But for me, he's just outside of the top 50.
I like, again, just like what you did when you had the one earlier with Edge. I think your evidence is perfectly valid. I have Punk considerably higher, and we'll get there.
I would assume most people would.
Yeah, no, but I mean, your evidence is fine. I think a lot of people may have thought Punk was lost in the shuffle during the ECW run, and even before, pre pipe bomb. But others just like him in general, like me. But I think your evidence is perfectly valid for putting him where you put him. A lot of people probably think that way. Probably not a boatload, but I'm sure a few people think other people. I like that. Good evidence, Nate. I'm impressed tonight because you've made some pretty. This has been one of the more controversial of our episodes in this series because we got a lot of interesting picks in the 50s. And
who was the fake Johnny Cochran from Seinfeld? Was that Jackie Childs?
You caught me on so the guy next to me is the Seinfeld guy. I'm completely lost. CM Punk was
Seinfeld. It was Jackie Childs. I went to the Jackie Childs School of Arguing. He can't have a guilty bystander. Have you ever had a bystander?
I'm gonna ask him on the when we go off the air. I'm gonna ask him, and then when we do our next part, I'll let you know if who he was. You're probably right. All right, now I will give everyone the Place to Be Nation fan composite number 52. If you're still haven't thrown your laptop out the window or your tablet, this number 52 has already been discussed by me. In fact, earlier in this, I believe it was earlier in this episode, or it might have been last episode. He's on 107 ballots, so only 11 people didn't put him on there. He was as low as 100. He was as high as 20, and that is the Big Boss Man. So solid pick there for solid Hall of Famer. All right, Brother Nate, your final pick of the show, number 51.
All right. So people would say, who do you have ranked higher than Edge and Daniel Bryan and CM Punk? Well, I'll tell you, folks, this guy is a former World Heavyweight Champion. He's a former WWE Champion. He's a former IC Champion. He's a multiple-time World Tag Team Champion. This man has been on your television screens since 1995. He is a bona fide first ballot WWE Hall of Famer the day he retires. But you still hate him. It's got to be Kane.
Yeah. And I think well, go ahead. You give your go ahead. You give your comments. I have one sentence about Kane, but I'll say it after you have your comments. Go ahead.
Kane is this guy has done more with a gimmick that should have failed than just about anybody in the company. To make this last for 20 years, what could have easily been a bootleg version of The Undertaker? He's made this thing last 20 years, and he's had some highs and lows, and he's been one of those guys that is in the revolving door of face and heel turns, but I've enjoyed a lot of Kane stuff, man. When we talk about early stuff with Kane, when he was fighting his brother or when he was fighting DX. The X-Pac Kane feud was surprisingly good. You talk about his tag team with Daniel Bryan. I thought that worked out better than it had any reason to, and you kind of saw both get to show some personality in that team. Of course, you can't talk about Kane and tag teams without talking about the Brothers of Destruction, who, again, if this were our tag team list, I think I'd have the Destruction fairly high. And so, yeah, I get why people can be tired of Kane, because much like the Big Show, he's just been a presence on our TV screens for so long. But this is not a dude that is phoning it in. When he was doing the corporate Kane stuff, that's something that could have fallen flat, but Kane made it work. Or Glenn Jacobs, should I say Mr. Mayor? Glenn Jacobs made that work.
Right.
And for a guy that started off in Smoky Mountain as the Unabomb and came in as who was he first? Was he Isaac Yankem first, or was he fake Razor Ramon?
He was fake Diesel. No, he was Isaac Yankem first.
Okay, so and the guy he went from Isaac Yankem to fake Diesel. This dude should have been gone. And we've got the Katie Vick angle with Triple H. The fact that this dude is still around and still relevant and still gets a pop when he comes out, I think that's a testament to the work that he's put in. And again, one of the themes of our episodes have been glue guys. And I know a lot of people might not like this glue, but Kane's been somebody that has been a constant force in the WWE for 2 decades, and I think he deserves a spot on the list.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I think the word, and I'll get more into Kane down the line, but I think the word that Kane comes to is fatigue.
Yeah.
He's not bad. He's never been terrible. Some people may think so, but I think it's just fatigue. Like, we don't need him in 2018. The roster's fine. We don't need him around anymore. But when he was in his prime,
he's pretty agile for a big man.
Yeah, he was. He is. And I think he was fine during his time. We just don't need him now. But that doesn't take away from his resume, though. Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Good pick. Good pick, Brother Nate. All right. My lack of the show, my number 51, is a guy who had multiple times here in the company. and were great in both of them. He was a crazed heel in the mid-'80s. He beat the shit out of Mel Phillips. And then he came back wearing pantyhose on his head and was still awesome. My number 51. He has his own university. The Funker, Terry Funk. And this was a guy that I originally was going to have much lower until Justin and I started watching him on our Vintage Vault, which is 1986. And I realized, this dude's fucking great. To steal from my boy Nate. This dude's great. And he was fantastic. Tremendous heel. He was a sociopath. Had great couple great title matches with Hogan. Great tag match on an otherwise, morbid WrestleMania 2. And came back in 98 after, an era in ECW and actually stretch in WCW, NWA. And was great in 98. Even came back well past his prime in 06 to wrestle at One Night Stand. Add all that time together, and you've got a great superstar. And a guy that I think deserves to be on this list. Even though he left because his horse was sick. Which is what the note he got in 87. He was supposed to come back in 93, ended up not. And he ended up staying in ECW and ended up giving himself a pretty good life. But he's a guy that definitely belongs on this list because he's just, every time we've seen him, he's just been so good. So good. A tremendous heel. So, my 51-8. The Funker himself, Terry Funk.
Okay, and obviously I had Funk on my list, and we've talked, Scotty, about how if this were a NWA or WCW list, even an ECW list, he'd probably be higher.
Oh, definitely. Top 15. Easily.
But yeah, he had an interesting run with the Federation. Like, I think he had some highs and he had some lows. And yeah, if you're looking at the high point of his career, you might find a couple during his time with the WWF. But most of that'll be outside of the company. But yeah, Terry Funk's an all-time great, and I think he does deserve a spot on the list.
Okay. All right, and to wrap up this episode, the number 51 on the Place to Be Nation fan composite list, he was on 98 ballots. He was as low as 99, as high as 26. We've taught him this evening, and he's on both our lists. And he's the reason that I all got flummoxed on whose turn it was, because I kept thinking of his theme song, Uncle Cracker himself, X-Pac / Sean Waltman. So, he was the fan composite list, number 51. All right, we've done it, Brother Nate. We are halfway there. Halfway there. To recap, here was my 60 to 51. Ric Flair, Umaga, Sheamus, Pedro Morales, Kevin Nash, Kofi Kingston, Yokozuna, Sean Waltman, Jake Roberts, and Terry Funk.
And I had Bam Bam Bigelow, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, Ken Kennedy, Kofi Kingston, Trish Stratus, Daniel Bryan, Edge, Jeff Hardy, CM Punk, and Kane.
That a very hot 10 right there. It's a scalding. It's melting. It's melting laptops. We are halfway through the series, Place to Be Nation main event listeners and other listeners. By the way, if you're just listening to this for the first time or this series, we do have a regular show, Place to Be Nation's main event. Every other week we talk right now with a myriad of guests and greatness, so please check it out. You'll see our full catalog on PlaceToBeNation.com. That'll wrap up this episode. We will be back. We are halfway done. 50 down, 50 to go.